On this week's show, the Sun Belt Tournament begins. The Georgia Southern women in action early in the week in an exciting game. We'll have highlights. We'll also take you out to the baseball diamond where Georgia Southern hosts Elon in a 3-game series. All that and more as we welcome you inside the Eagles Nest. Welcome inside the Eagles Nest. I'm your host, Josh Aubrey, being joined by Mike Anthony, sports editor and Georgia Southern beat writer for the Statesboro Herald. And Mike, the Sun Belt basketball tournament is underway. Georgia Southern women played, and I guess it's a microcosm of the season. They come close and just weren't able to hold on. Triple overtime game, an exciting game. They had a couple of opportunities but couldn't pull it out. Your thoughts on the ball game there from Tuesday night?
Well, this is a team that had struggled all year. They were the 11th seed out of 12 teams. Knew they were up against it, but they came out swinging. It's all you can do, a do-or-die game, and held a lead for large portions of the game, held a lead into the final minute of regulation. Then they gave it away, but to their credit, they played from behind in all three of the overtime periods. This is a team that easily could have called it a season, but they didn't. They fought till the end. Not quite enough gas left in the tank, but this is a team that showed that it's trying to improve. It's taken some baby steps forward. Only 2 real contributors to the team leaving after this year due to graduation. So hopefully it's something to build off of, hopefully get a little bit more momentum rolling through next season.
All right, well, we got some highlights. Let's go out and see how things went from down in New Orleans. The Georgia Southern women opening up Sun Belt Conference play in the tournament as the 11th seed taking on 6th seed Louisiana. First half, and the game goes back and forth. Nicole Franks from way downtown for the Eagles with the 3. Later, Eagles up by 9, and Louisiana coming back. Troy Swain for 3. Georgia Southern up 36-31 at the half. Second half, Simone Fields off the inbounds. The Raging Cajuns taking the lead. The Eagles right back. Rianne Brown pops for 2 of her 13 in the game. Eagles by 2. The Raging Cajuns then on the break, and Skylar Goodwin, the hoop and the foul. Louisiana takes a 1-point lead. Again, back come the Eagles. Alexis Folks, 3 of her 12 points. She'd add 14 rebounds as well for the double-double. Tied at 58, Louisiana with a chance for the win, but Nakia Jones off the mark, and we go to overtime. In overtime, the Cajuns getting the ball inside to Terona Lutz, and the game will be tied at 64. Again, the Cajuns with a chance, but unable to get a shot off, and we go to double overtime. In the second overtime, Skylar Goodman, 2 more of her game-high 28 points. Later, tied at 72, Nakia Jones puts it in. Cajuns by 2. 19 seconds left. Eagles down 2. Alexis Brown off the mark, but check out the putback by Haley Diaz-Allen. That would somehow manage to send this game into a third overtime. In the triple overtime, the Cajuns off the mark here, but Goodwin with the rebound and the putback. And finally, Swain will hit a 3, and the Eagles season ends as they fall 88-81. Well, only 5 wins on the entire season for Georgia Southern and 2 in conference play. Tough season. Have to wait and see how things go, if there's any changes made or anything before next year. All right, well, let's shift gears to the guys. They're the number 3 seed. They're going to open up play Friday night in New Orleans as the 3 seed. And, you know, as the time we're shooting, we don't know who their opponent will be. But your thoughts on them going into the tournament? They're on a bit of a roll. They won their last couple games and go in with some pretty hot shooting. Yeah, it's a little bit of a cliche, but you ask any coach and they say that you want to peak at the right time. And you remember last year, this is a team that was in the 1 or 2 spot for almost the entire season. Then the last month, couldn't get anything right. They stumbled,
didn't suffer too much in terms of seeding, but just weren't playing good basketball. They were one and done for a second consecutive year at the tournament. This time around, they started off well, had a little bit of a bump in the road in the middle of the schedule, a couple of games lost at home that they probably want back, but to their credit, that final weekend of the season, they knew what they had to do. They had 2 home games. They had to win both to ensure that 3 seed in the bye. They went out and did it against 2 solid teams, and now they get, I guess you could say, a preferable schedule. It seemed like Louisiana and UT Arlington were the 2 teams that really outmatched Georgia Southern during the regular season. They're both on the other half of the bracket. They've got Georgia State, possibly waiting them in a semifinal, either Arkansas State or UL Monroe coming in their first matchup on Friday, but really doesn't matter who's in front of you right now. All you can do is win, because the alternative is season's over.
Right. And you mentioned the fact that UT Arlington, who we know has got the potential to win this whole thing, as Louisiana, who we know has been strong from the beginning to the end. And they also present some matchup problems in both of those for Georgia Southern, because they're fairly strong in the post, and Georgia Southern maybe not as much firepower down low. So, and if the Eagles are hot, we all know if they get hot from the outside, they can knock off anybody. Hopefully they'll be able to continue to shoot well from three-point land there in the tournament. All right, well, shifting gears, Mike, we go outdoors, where the Georgia Southern baseball team was in action this past week. By the time we shot last week, they had lost after that 4-game win streak to the College of Charleston, and turned around and played another former Southern Conference foe in Elon, and the bats just weren't going very well this weekend at all. Pitching was pretty good. They end up losing 2 of 3.
Yeah, they lose 2 of 3 the first 2 games. Really a struggle. 20 strikeouts for the Eagles in the first game of the series. Another almost dozen or so in the second game. Just weren't able to get guys on, weren't able to move them over. When they did have their chances, they weren't hitting with runners in scoring position. But as you mentioned, the pitching, I know that we kind of were knocking on the bullpen in the first weekend of the season. They kept them in some of those games, and then on Sunday, when the bats finally came around, they get a big lead. Elon able to chip away at it, but in the end, the bullpen comes up with the stops that they need, and they're able to salvage one and hopefully get things going back in the right direction.
All right, well, let's get out and take a look at some of the highlights from the Elon series. Georgia Southern and Elon in the first of 3 at J.I. Clemens. Game 1, Brian Eichhorn on the mound, and he'd go solid 6 innings, getting some nice defensive help. Check out the catch here by Nolan Tressler. Good diving grab later in the 6th. Tressler can't come up with this one. It'll fall for a double. 2-run score, and it's 2-0 Elon on top. The Eagles try and come back. Mason McWhorter doubles down the left field line. Stephen Curry scores, but it wouldn't be enough, and Georgia Southern falls in this one by a final of 4-2. They lose 3-2 on Saturday. Sunday they were trying to avoid the sweep, up 1-0, and it's McWhorter with the single into left. 2-run score, and the Eagles extend their lead to 3-0. Next up, Matt Anderson, and he'll single into center field. 2 more Georgia Southern runs will come home, and the Eagle lead is extended to 5-0. The Phoenix come back in the 5th. Zach Evers with the RBI single to center, cutting the lead to 5-1. Ryan Ogren adds the RBI single. Elon gets another to cut the lead to 1, but the Eagles able to hold on, and they take this final game of the series by a score of 5-4. So next up for the baseball team, they'll be traveling to Southern Miss coming up Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. All right, Mike, plenty of other things to get to, other sports going on right now. Football starts this week officially on Thursday, but they really won't get into much until next week, so we'll kind of hold off till next week to get into spring football. But we also have softball improving to our now 12-6 overall, and the golf team, Georgia Southern, comes up with a big second place finish as they try to get some momentum going up for the Schenkel.
Yeah, Georgia Southern really showed a good weekend at the Palmetto, a strong field as always, there in South Carolina. A rough first round for the Eagles. They pull it together a little bit in the second 18 holes on Monday. Then on Tuesday, everybody wakes up, and talking to head coach Carter Collins, he said it's a tough enough course, but it was cold, it was wet, you could see it in the scores. Georgia Southern actually had the best round of the day on Tuesday. Not quite enough to catch up to Virginia, your ultimate winner, but another very strong ACC school. But Georgia Southern, they'll take that second place, try to build it up to the Schenkel. We know a few years ago they finally won one. Be great to see them back up at the top this week.
Yeah, and I've had somebody other than who's normally been leading the way for them, because Jake Story ended up, I think, second. Is that?
He tied for first and I believe lost in a playoff.
That's
and then
right.
you had Archer Price, who was in first for much of the tournament. He was 500 at one point, fell off a couple strokes at the end. But if he could have hung on, that would have been the third different individual Eagle to win a tournament as the low individual medalist.
All right, and the Schenkel begins next week at Forest Heights Country Club, a good field, and we'll preview that in depth for you next week. But for now, that'll wrap things up. For Mike Anthony, I'm Josh Aubrey. Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you again next week.